We are the US government. We are here to bring freedom to your development processes. You get into a book list now if you buy the KNR book. Bro, would you consider using Dark Reader? I love your vids. People are not going to be happy when I put out my light theme video. I've got a light theme video coming out very, 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 very soon. Basically saying that light themes aren't actually that bad. Instead, the real problem with light theme is just shitty themes. That's my new hot take. Okay, cool. Let me just grab the Linux cast. So the video is GitHub is not an app store. Is that the video? Presumably. KD6 video when? Very soon. Oh god, it actually references my video. Jesus Christ. The post is out there. You can find the post, Matt. You don't have to take it from my video. Anyway, let's see what our boy Matt has to say.
So there is a post going around that looks like this, and Brodie Robertson made a video about this yesterday. Now, I will say that Brodie does
about a week ago now, actually.
Good job of explaining his argument, though I think he could use some better examples over why his argument makes sense. But
I hope he brings up examples of why my examples are not good. But we'll see what he has to say.
Really beside the point, because I want to delve a little bit deeper into this idea.
So what the hell is that? Hold up. Oh, it's Vivaldi. Oh. Well, that's a cool looking theme, and I forgot that Vivaldi added all this stuff. Huh. Developers defaulting to yeah, that's what I mean about bad light themes.
So I'm not gonna read this. Everyone's probably seen it, especially if you troll Reddit at all.
Absolutely.
And the idea here is that GitHub portrays itself as something that it's not. So, Brodie,
I don't think GitHub necessarily portrays itself as something that it's not. I think GitHub offers tools, and then developers use those tools as the only option. Like, GitHub should have the ability to distribute binaries, but it's on developers to not use that as the only possible way to get access to the software. I think it's... Yeah, I think it's not necessarily all on GitHub there.
He argues that GitHub is actually a distribution platform because a lot of developers use it as a...
No, like, yes and no. I argue that GitHub is being used as a distribution platform, not necessarily that it is one. It's a slight, very, very slight distinction, but I think it does sort of lead to some very important differences.
The distribution platform, which is absolutely true. I would argue that it's not as blatantly a distribution platform as an app store. So you could say that, or I would argue that GitHub is not an app store because they bury the binaries. They bury the...
Yeah, it's definitely not an app store, for sure. The problem is a lot of developers use it as the one place they distribute their application. It's more like a download site. Like, that's probably the best way to put it, I would say.
The source code, actually. Well, not necessarily they bury the source code. They bury the releases of the source code. So, this little spot over here...
Yeah, GitHub should have a button right here that says releases.
Is where all the source code that it has been released as official releases exists. Obviously, this
actually should have like current release here. You can have releases down here as like the previous releases, but whatever's tagged as latest should have a download button right here.
Where all the source code that is currently being worked on is located. This is where the releases are. And if this were an app store, this would be horrible design, right? Because this is where you need to go if you want to get the binaries or whatever.
Well, it's also hidden down like way at the bottom here. There's not like a download button here. It's all like if you have a big changelog, there might be like 1,000 lines of changelog before you can get to any of these downloads.
Of the application that you're trying to download. If you want the dev package, you have to go there in order to actually get it.
Also, yeah, the other thing, if they have multiple different kinds of releases, like you have to know specifically what extension you're actually looking for.
Application that you're trying to download. If you want the deb package, you have to go there in order to actually get it. So the argument that GitHub is a distribution platform is true, but it's not so black and white as that. Because I think that GitHub is for a particular segment of the population. And I'm not talking about developers. So Brodie talks about how some people argue that GitHub is for developers only. That's absolutely not true. Now, is there a segment of the usage of GitHub that is for developers only? Yes. If you're posting on GitHub, you're a developer of some kind.
Like, not necessarily. I actually have seen people put up like tutorials for setting things up on GitHub. Some people will just use it as like a text hosting site. So not necessarily. But 9 times out of 10, yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, there are layers and levels and degrees to these things. Like, I post stuff to GitLab. I'm not a developer, but I post code to GitHub or GitLab. And that's what...
If you write any sort of code, I think you're a developer. Like, I don't think there's really any point to... Like, Matt probably has, like, a... Does he have a Qtile configuration? I presume Matt's used Qtile before. The Linux cast Qtile. Yeah, here's Qtile. If you've written any Qtile configuration, you've written Python code, you're a developer. That's fair.
GitHub and GitLab are forced to post code too. But there's also another aspect of these services where they're more user-facing, they're community-facing. So people go there for access to software in addition to you being able to post there. The question becomes, of course, is there a...
I use GitHub for backup purposes. If you're backing up, like, script files and stuff, that makes sense. Please don't back up, like... actually important things on GitHub. That's not what it's for.
Social contract that is signed between the developers who post their code and the users who come to get their code. And the answer to that question is really, really effing complicated, especially when you're talking about open source. And I say this knowing that everyone knows this. But when it comes to free and open source software, the
Also, I just noticed Matt's doing this video at 7:50. Is that... I presume... It doesn't say AM or PM there, so I guess it's 7:50 in the morning. Man, I'm not even out of bed at 7:50 in the morning. I haven't even woken up at 7:50 in the morning.
Developers owe the users absolutely nothing. Like, literally nothing. Knows this. But when it comes to free and open source software, the developers owe the users absolutely nothing. Like...
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I do think there is a... Like, it's this weird situation, right? Where you have this open source space that is powering massive, massive corporations. I do think that if someone actually wants... like, really wants something to be done, and, like, they're saying, hey, get this done, if they're willing to pay for it, I do kind of wish that more developers would be willing to, like, put that forth, right? I know a lot of devs would probably be afraid of asking for money, but honestly, if you say, I don't want to work on this, but if you pay me X amount, I will do it, like, I'm not opposed to that. Maybe that would get some devs in trouble and there'd be, like, some drama about it, but honestly, like, I do kind of wish that some devs actually did that, and there are, like, bug bounty programs and things like that some projects do get involved with, but as, like, a more general rule, I do kind of wish that devs would just be like, yo, I'm not going to do that, but if you want to pay me, like, just accept the fact, like, if you're doing this, like, 30 hours a week, 40 hours a week, like, if you don't want to do something and someone's willing to pay for you, like, let them pay for it. Because there are some people out there who have a lot of money to burn who are willing to actually do so.
Literally nothing. The vast majority of people who post open source software specifically on GitHub probably are doing so for $0.
Very true.
They're just doing it because they're either interested in the project or they thought that they were going to help out, whatever the case, right? Mm-hmm. They're doing it out of probably the goodness of their heart on their own dime. Mm-hmm. Therefore, they don't owe the community anything.
Absolutely.
So The argument that there needs to be some kind of effort made on the part of developers who distribute on GitHub,
with the exception of applications that do have some sort of payment system. Like, Bitwarden, for example, does have their paid version. I think in that case, then the developers actually do owe you something. Like, if you are if you are offering them money to use a service, then they do owe you something. If you are using something for free, no, absolutely.
To make their distribution of that software more quote-unquote noob-friendly doesn't really fly with me all that much, simply because of the nature of GitHub and GitLab. And
yeah, this is a big part of why I talk. Like, I know I'm cutting Matt off a lot. This is a big part of the stuff I talk about with GNOME. People say things like, "Oh, GNOME doesn't care about customization. GNOME doesn't care about this. GNOME doesn't care about that." That's fine. They don't have to. If GNOME has an idea about what they want to do as a desktop, and that doesn't align with what you want from a desktop, you don't have to use that desktop. You can go and use KDE. You can go and use XSC. You can go and use anything else out there. If a project decides that we want to have this specific focus, they are allowed to have that focus.
All goes back to the idea that this here is not an app store. It's not an app store. It may be a distribution platform, which Brodie argues that it is, and I would agree. But just because both the GNOME Software Center and GitHub are both distribution platforms does not make them equal. It also does not make them palatable to the same audiences.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense. So GitHub and GitLab are for specific audiences, whereas the GNOME Software Center or Discover or PAMAC or the Snap Store or FlatHub, whatever, their audience is much broader. And I think that the differentiation between those two scenarios, those two audience bases, if you will, is an important one. We have to realize that just because there are...
I think the issue that happens, and the reason why I wanted to do that video, is because there are developers who don't see the distinction. Like, imagine, for example, that... Take an application like VLC. Imagine the only way to get VLC wasn't from the VLC website, wasn't from your package manager. The only way to get it was from GitHub. That was the way that they were distributing the application. I think we can all agree, like, that's really annoying, and nobody likes that. But there are so many applications out there where the only way they are being distributed is from GitHub, is from GitLab. They don't have a website, they don't have a third-party repo, they don't have, like, an app image or anything else like that. It is just from the GitHub. And here's the thing, you don't have to do something besides that. You can, if you want to, only distribute from GitHub. But it is... I'm still going to complain about you doing that because it is still going to be annoying. Like, you don't have the right for people not to complain about what you're doing. You don't have to listen to them, right? Like, you can just say, no, I think you're wrong, I'm just not going to do that. But in the same vein, people are allowed to say that I don't like this as the way it's being done. And many devs don't do this, like, as the way to distribute, and that's why we have things like FlatHub, like app images, like packages on repos. There are a lot of devs out there who say, I actually want this to be available easily on my system, and they go and package it. So, like, there is these two camps that aren't really conflicting with each other. It's just two different groups of people that want to approach software differently. And the great thing about it being open source is that anybody can actually get involved with it like this. That kind of software typically won't show up in a store full of GUI apps. My rebuttal is that the original video was talking about CLI utility. That kind of software typically won't show up in a store full of GUI apps. Yeah, but it could appear on, like, a package manager, like on Pacman or apt. So even if it's not in, like, a package store, it could still be in a package manager.
Binaries on GitHub being distributed does not necessarily mean that those binaries are on an equal playing field to those that are distributed through the repositories of your given distro. And what I mean by that is that the audiences themselves tend to be different. But I will concede that every once in a while, the audiences of them do cross. So, and they cross both ways. More technical users, a lot of times, will get their software from GNOME Software Center. Less technical users will sometimes go to Google and find themselves on a page that looks like this. Mm-hmm. And the most interesting question that we will posit today is asking the question, does this suit new users? And should there be an effort on the part of developers and maybe GitHub itself to make this page here more accessible to new users? And
I would argue yes. Like, the amount of tooling that's available to lay out this page is very, very minimal. Like, you get changelog assets. Like, you can't break these down by systems. You can't say, like, oh, these are the Linux binaries, these are the 32-bit binaries, these 64-bit binaries, these are the Windows binaries, or anything like that. Like, you get big list. You get big list. That's all you get.
Where Brodie and I will differ, and I think that this would be the case, is that I don't think that there needs to be an effort on GitHub to make it more usable for new users. Now, normally,
I don't think it's just more usable for new users. I think more usable for developers. Like, the releases page is very, very bare minimal. Like, or bare minimum? Whatever. Like, that page is like, there is no customization there. I think even for the developers, it would make sense to do a revamp.
On my channel, I'm very much make things as accessible for noobs as possible, because I am a noob, and I always will be one. That's the way I consider myself. I'm not a developer of any kind. I have base level knowledge of a lot of things, as they say, a jack of all trades, a master of none, or whatever the saying is. I don't even know today. It's been a very long day, but the point is that I don't know all.
I'm guessing it's 7:50 p.m. then, if you're saying it's been a long day. Otherwise, I don't know what the fuck time you got out of bed.
I'm not an expert on Linux. I know some people think that I'm an expert on Linux. I'm absolutely not an expert on Linux or any open source.
I feel the exact same way. People are like, oh my god, you run Arch, you've been using window managers so long, you're an expert. Like, nope, not at all. On the repo home, show a link to the latest tag released. The release page should hide the assets that don't match your OS. It's a bit difficult to do that with the Linux version, like the Linux packages, because then you need to determine distros, and a lot of distros don't report that stuff properly, and you'd be checking the user agent string, and most distros sensibly don't say what they are. So you couldn't really do that. You could say you're on Linux, except for the fact that a lot of things don't report, like a lot of browsers don't report being on Linux properly because there's no reason to. I think just having categories, if you give the developer the ability to split things into categories, saying these are the Linux ones, these are the Windows ones, these are the Mac ones, so you can like close the list that you don't need to see. Instead of just having a big list, let it be categories.
Software. I use them. I know how to use them in some cases, sometimes even very well. But there are still many things about, say, for example, OBS, which I use every single day, that I don't know how to do.
Oh, I have no idea how to do. I've seen some crazy VTuber stuff where I'm just like, I don't know, like, what I would need to do to even enable half of what they're doing.
So Audacity or Firefox or whatever. You know, that's just the situation. And I think that that qualification is important because everyone has a different level of skills. They also have a different level of interest in learning new skills. And if you're like the guy who made this post, chances
which, for the record, if you look at their post history, is bait. This person is on a burner account. This account was made a month ago, and every post they have is trolling. This is not a serious post, by the way. Like, it's actually not serious at all.
You're not interested in learning new skills. And if that's your situation, GitHub and GitLab are places you should stay away from. Now, I know that sounds very gatekeepery. If that, definitely not a word, but it does sound like...
Gatekeepery? I'd probably say it. To be fair, my English is horrible, so don't take my word on what words are.
I'm being a gatekeeper, or in this case, GitHub is a gatekeeper. And I suppose you could argue that's true. But the way that I look at it, and this is going to show my Microsoft roots, and I apologize for this, but I was a Windows user for a very long time.
Same.
I worked alongside IT for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, if you remember back, and I don't even know if it's still a thing because I haven't been in the IT space in a while, but there used to be this thing called MSDN. And MSDN was like a knowledge base / software repository for all things Microsoft.
I think it still exists.
Many more things than just that. But that's what I remember it as. Like, especially when I was in college, I remember MSDN as being the place where you could go, even if you weren't a member of like a IT organization, to get software. Like you could get Visual Studio, not like Visual Studio Code, but the act.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, you could like when I was in school, we had like a student account. We could log into this and like grab a bunch of software. I think you get like GitHub. You get like GitHub Enterprise and stuff like that. I don't know what's in there like now, but back then there was a lot of like code editors as well.
Actual full
like paid ones.
Visual Studio, which would cost like $1,000.
Yeah.
You could go there and get it for free if you had a subscription, or if your organization had a subscription. Mm-hmm. And the way that I look at GitHub is kind of like that. Like, you would not expect a new user to be able to go to MSDN and do everything that they say there. They had a lot of technical documents there, a lot of documentation that was for IT professionals. And in a way, I consider GitHub and GitLab to be kind of like that. Now, the problem with that argument, of course, is that GitHub and GitLab are much more accessible broadly than MSDN ever was. So MSDN obviously required a subscription, and also it required you to have access to it in some form or fashion, whether it was your own personal subscription or an organization of your organization having a subscription. So it was much more behind a walled garden than GitHub and GitLab are. So my argument does fall apart a bit. But my general point is that GitHub and GitLab like I said earlier, that their audience is more technologically minded.
Right.
And just because you can go there from Google doesn't necessarily mean that you should. But more so, really, it's not that you shouldn't go there. It's that you should, at least if you do go there, at least be willing to learn something to pass through the gates to, install the software that you want to install. Because
I'm not seeing why. Maybe he gets to it afterwards, but I'm not seeing why this has anything to do with GitHub not doing a revamp. Like, I understand like the point he's getting about like not like learning how GitHub works and all that, but I'm still confused why he would argue that GitHub shouldn't have a revamp because of that. I always thought GitHub was a social media for developers looking to improve their code and share information with one another. GitHub is very much the social media-y Git platform for sure. It's the most of that regard, and it's definitely going more down that route. I'm honestly surprised they don't like have like a post history and like things like that. I'm surprised they haven't just gone like full LinkedIn basically.
There are certain technological things that appear all the time on GitHub. And if you aren't willing to learn those things, then you're not the audience for GitHub. That's just the bottom line of it. Now, like I said, does that make me a gatekeeper, or does that make GitHub a gatekeeper, or whatever they're calling it these days? Maybe. But things don't have to be for everyone, right? GitHub is not the premier place.
They don't have to be for everyone, but I don't see any reason why they can't be better. Like, I'm still not seeing why... he doesn't, or why that's an issue here.
To distribute software on Linux or on Windows or Mac or OS, it's just not. It's a place where you can distribute software. It's an option for people, but it's a technical option, right? It's a place where it requires, in order to have entry to it, you have to have some technical knowledge to do so. At least in a lot of cases, right? There are other places, like GNOME Software Center, like FlatHub, like Snap Store, that are more generalized places to get software.
Yeah, but that doesn't work when the software's not there. Like, that's the issue here, right? Like, the crux of my entire issue is there is some software where the only place that you can get it is from the GitHub. If there wasn't cases like that, if everybody had like a third-party repo at a bare minimum, like there would be no argument here. But the issue is that's not the case, and there is a lot of software where you have to go to GitHub if you want to get it. This is a good, this is a common example with, plugins, right? Obviously, KDE and GNOME have, plugin stores and whatever, but if you're looking for Hyperland plugins, for example, Hyperland plugins are only available on the repo. There's no Hyperland plugins that are being packaged, and you have to go to GitHub then. There's just no other option.
And those don't require the technical knowledge.
I missed the point behind why making binaries more accessible and organized a bad thing shouldn't be done. Yeah, I'm not sure, why he has that perspective.
That GitHub and GitLab tend to do. And I think that is the key distinction here that we need to keep in mind when we see people posting things like that GitHub post or that Reddit post or whatever, where they talk about how they don't understand GitHub, why it has to have code. GitHub has code because... Again,
the post was not real. It was a troll account.
GitHub is about the code. It's a place to store code. That's what GitHub is. Yes, it's also a distribution platform, but it's also primarily a
HyperPM. Well, you still need to go to GitHub to find the link to the plugins.
Place where developers go to store code. Are there other features like the ability to compile code there, like to distribute binaries there? Yes, those extra features do exist, but the primary reason behind GitHub is to store code. And it would be really weird to go to a place and...
Actually, the primary purpose behind GitHub is to have a really fancy-looking portfolio page. But I know what he's saying. As I said, GitHub is a social media platform. That is what GitHub is.
Ignore its primary purpose because you want it to be something different. If you go there expecting it to be an app store, you're going to be disappointed because it's not an app store. It's just not. Yes, it distributes software, but it's not an app store. And treating it as such, I think, does it a disservice because it does so many other things, right? It's a multi-use tool for many different people, not only for users, but for developers.
Yes, there are a lot of people that do that as well.
Ecosystem, right? People who work alongside developers, people who just post their website, web developers, all sorts of people use GitHub for many different things, and trying to shoehorn it into being just an app store would diminish it in some way that would just be disappointing to the people who do use it for the most.
Well, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can keep it being this platform where it's great, unless you ask Linus Torvalds, for storing code and doing development. But you can also make the application distribution experience better as well. It's not a one or the other situation here. I'm not sure why he's bringing this up either.
Technical stuff, right? So if you are the type of person who goes to GitHub and expects it to be an app store, go actually use an app store.
And here's the other thing. While we can say you can't expect anything from, an open source project, I can expect something from a multi-billion-dollar company. Microsoft, make your website better.
Also, I think that there's something to be said if you want to get into getting software from places like GitHub and GitLab. If you find yourself often being funneled into those websites, having the willingness to learn some of the tools that you'll need in order to compile software, or at least to install binaries, you should.
I think you should learn it, right? I absolutely think you should. However, I don't think that if the developers choose that as the only place to get it, that it should be as difficult to find it.
One of the things I should talk about is that there's definitely, and this kind of came up in Brodie's video as well, there's a big difference between Gentoo and installing a regular binary. So, yes, there are pieces of software where there are no binaries and you have to compile it.
I'm not sure what the context is here. I don't remember what I said about Gentoo.
You want to use it. There are many examples. But if you go there to GitHub and GitLab and you find a binary, you should have the expertise in order to install it. That has nothing to do with the code, by the way. That's just another way of installing things like you would through an app store. So
Oh, right. I think I said that, I don't know what he's saying about what I said, but I said that even Gentoo users accept the fact that they don't want to deal with the code most of the time. Like, even a distro where you compile everything from source, most people aren't pulling down the code themselves. They are using a merge, which has got like the build scripts already there, which the Gentoo maintainers have been like dealing with, that they know builds. Even a Gentoo user doesn't want to deal with the code directly. They want to deal with this obfuscation that gives them a known working build script. And now Gentoo has the binary repos as well, which are going to sort of change the landscape of Gentoo a little bit more as well.
I think that just assuming that every piece of code that's on GitHub or GitLab has to be compiled is also disingenuous.
No, it definitely doesn't have to be. Absolutely. And again, this goes back to what I was saying. This is not a matter of you have to do something. Like, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to make a binary. You don't have to make the project in the first place. But it would be nice if you made a binary, right? Like, you shouldn't demand that someone does this thing. But it would be nice if they did it, right? Like, that's pretty much all I was saying. It would be nice, but you don't have to.
Quite a bit, because there's a lot of binaries down there as well. So I think that this is a much more complex thing than, you know, what some people are making out to be. But also, I think that, as I said, and just to wrap this up, not everything has to be for everyone.
Sure.
GitHub doesn't aim to be the universal source for all binary sourced applications. It doesn't aim to be that. It's primarily a code repository system. That's what it is, and they're happy for that.
I still think it's primarily a social media platform, but that's neither here nor there.
To be there, and I think that GitHub is happy to distribute software.
Whenever you say, but it sounds like you're ending it with what? Wait, what in the whenever you say, but it sounds like you're ending it with Say but. What? But is that the? Are you mocking my accent again?
And because that draws in other users as well, brings more people to the website.
Yes, I am. Thought so.
But it also, they're not. I don't think that they've ever claimed to want to be an app store. So, I think that trying to force something to be for everyone diminishes it for everyone as well. So,
trying to force it to be for everyone diminishes. Yeah, I still don't see how having a better releases page diminishes anything. Like, no one's arguing that GitHub should turn into like the App Store, or turn into the Play Store, or turn into whatever GNOME Store is called, or the Snap Store. Actually, the Snap Store is a great example. The Snap Store is very similar to GitHub in one respect, that there is no moderation of the Snap Store. There was a guy who just lost, like, what, was it 400,000? Yeah, like $400,000 because of a fake crypto wallet on the Snap Store. So maybe Snap Store is a very similar case to GitHub, where there's no moderation, where anything can be on there. Bring Matt back on the podcast just to discuss this video. I could do that, couldn't I? But I'm still not sure, like, why GitHub can't have a better releases page, and why that would diminish what's going on. Because my argument is pretty much just add the ability for the developer to have headings for different things they want to distribute. That's pretty much my entire... I think that by itself would make the releases page considerably better. That's the only thing you need. And then maybe have a button to download the latest thing at the top. Maybe have the downloads first and changelog after it. Actually, that's another one. Let the developer decide if it's a changelog or the assets first. That would also massively improve it.
That is it for this video. I know this was kind of a reaction video / rant video, whatever. It's very rambly. I was just in the mood to do a ramble, so
this was ramblier. I win the ramble off.
Did a ramble. If you have any thoughts on this topic, you can leave those in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. You can follow me on Mastodon or Odyssey. Those links will be in the video description. You can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/linuxcast. You can also head on over to the store, which is available at shop.thelinuxcast.org. There you'll find desk mats and hoodies and t-shirts and cups and magnets and all sorts of stuff.
I really should make my own merch at some point, shouldn't I? People have mentioned it for a long, long time. I don't think you really disagreed. I think your main point just sort of is... Yeah, I don't think there was really a disagreement here. Yeah, no, I agree. Yes, we want merch.
Proceeds that I get from there go directly to help me make more Linux content for you guys. So thank you so very much for those of you who have done so and will do so in the future. So thank you so
I
very much.
would buy and wear a shirt with Brodie's face on it. I'm not going to sell a shirt with my face on it.
Thanks everybody who does support me on Patreon and YouTube. I thank you so very, very much for your support.
Okay, that's everyone. Let's see what the comments are saying. I'll put this in the chat as well. So you want to go support Matt? Matt is cool. I've talked to Matt many times. He's a cool dude. Yeah. Let's see what the people in comments are saying. Not very happy with the way this video turned out, but there are some good points. File complaints here in the comment or on Mastodon. Okay, Matt's not a fan of the video either. It would be pleasant if there would be a page somewhere that explains what to do with all the files that appear on a GitHub page. Probably there is one. Generally, that's the README, but it's up to the developers to actually write it. 2 or 3 videos introducing how to use GitHub on their main page would be great, or at least an educational link to some videos. That actually would be nice, yeah. Maybe that would be... all of this stuff is easily found on YouTube, but yeah, maybe something like that would be good. Clearly a generation difference between yourself and Brodie. I don't think Matt's that old. I don't think Matt's that old. I agree that GitHub is not an app store, and it's up to the roles of the author if they choose to release binary or not using GitHub's release system, but it's still not an app store. Yeah, no, yeah, it's definitely not an app store. Absolutely. Some things require skill and do so by nature, like a terminal program. A terminal program does not require skill. No, it requires having a working keyboard. This read too much like satire. I looked up the OP's profile. It would seem like they're just a kid who didn't know anything. Yes, it is absolutely satire. You know exactly what you're talking about. If I could make one change to GitHub, it would be to show a description for each file instead of the last commit message. It just feels wrong. I'm not sure what you mean. Yeah, I know the developers would have to do that. Yeah, I don't know what you mean by that. Some developers don't want to make an easy executable package. Yeah, they don't, and they shouldn't have to. It's just another step a developer has to do and don't want to deal with people having problems or issues with the Bowtie package. Yeah, no, that's fair. Gatekeepery, I don't think so. It's just Bitkeeper. What? What? What does that mean? Make an exe. Why Windows user want an OS int tool? Because they want to stalk people. That's why. That's it. I'm glad you pointed this out. It's not gatekeeping to cater to people. No, I don't think it is not. It is not it's not gatekeeping to not cater to people. No, yeah, that's fair. I feel like I recognize what that picture's from. I guess you could say some people just don't get it. True, brother. If you're not a paying customer and you don't have... yeah, and you don't have power... wait. If you're not paying, you're not a customer and you don't have power to bargain. I think you can still bargain by not consuming something. One thing certainly isn't another, but let's ignore that fact for the sake of a rant to meet the content schedule quota. I don't know what in the world you're talking about. Package X is the future. I don't know what Package X is. GitHub is basically an app store. Maybe it should be called a computer program store. Shut up. Apps and programs are the same thing. I will die on this hill. Wait, it's not an app store, then who did I give my credit card to? You gave it to me. The open source community should move away from Microsoft GitHub. Yeah, that's not going to happen, though. The open source community said they were going to move away from the Rust Foundation as well. But that didn't happen. Oh, look who it is. GitHub is for developers, more importantly, this post was a joke. Yes, it was. It was never sincere. Why are you taking a meme as a legitimate opinion? I specifically specified that it's a meme in my video because I checked out that history. I knew what I was looking at there. I just had to dig in a little bit more. Yeah, I don't think Matt's like completely wrong here. I think Matt might have just missed like a little bit of the argument I was making. Pretty much. Like that's pretty much it. Like I don't think GitHub's an app store either, but I do think you can make the like way releases are handled a little bit more customizable. Okay, how about a shirt with a pocket on the chest and a little Brodie peeking out the pocket? Oh my god. Really? Is that what you want? Brodie could use his PNG tube character. I could do that, couldn't I? I could use this little cutie and put that right there. And people on the main channel would have no context of what that is and why there is a cat girl on my merch. Yeah, no, go check out Matt's video. And all that stuff. I don't know. I don't have anything else to say about it, really. What do you guys think? What do you guys think of the video? I would buy a shirt with the words "jump like a kangaroo." I feel like Idea Factory would not be very happy about me selling a shirt with a Neptunia quote on it. Maybe I could get away with it. GitHub has GitHub pages. They could provide a default template for projects to use so that it shows the latest release. That's fair. Yeah, no, I agree. That's fair. No one else got any thoughts? No, nothing. Yeah, I think it's a good video for the most part. I do think he probably should have like laid out his thoughts maybe a bit more beforehand. I usually try to note out like my main points so I don't just ramble. And I try to actually get to the point I'm trying to say. GitHub is just the porn hub of Git repos. I don't know what that means. Change my mind. I don't know what that's supposed to mean to change your mind. Anyway, I guess we'll just end it off there. In a better future, every open source project would host their own Git services. Yeah, but that was what we did in the past. And then people realized they didn't want to do that because that's too much hassle. I honestly think it would be up to the dev to do what they want. At the end of the day, if it's the difference between people using the app or not, it's up to them. Same goes with any documentation or README. Yeah, fair. That's totally fair. Like, at the end of the day, I just want devs to have the tools to do things better. It's up to the developers to use those tools in a productive way. But right now, the tools don't exist on GitHub. If you want to easily lay this stuff out, you have to make your own external website or a GitHub page or something like that. The releases page is not a suitable system in its current state, and it could be improved with some some very, very minor changes. But, yeah, I think we'll end it there. So,